Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I am talking to Yancy Wright, who has a brand new leadership book coming out, my big passion, and he is coming to us from Puerto Rico, a place that is so dear to my heart. I spent some time there when I was just finishing up college, teaching flying, and so I don't know whether we'll get into that, but it just makes this conversation extra special to know that's where you are right now. And I've been back a couple times. I'm due to go back again. But before we get started, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. So Yancy, you are the founder of Alterna Vida. Did I butcher that badly? Leadership and Casa Alterna Vida. And you've got a brand new book that's titled Amplify Your Leadership. I want to start by just having you tell me your story and who you are, what what you're passionate about, the big problem you're focused on, and how you're working on solving it.
Thanks. That's a good list of questions, Steve. I'm curious, have you ever had a career burnout?
I have not really.
Have some
honestly.
of your leaders, some of your listeners?
I know lots of people who have, but if you knew me, my team would say, nah, he'd never do that. It's just not my personality.
Okay, good for you. Well, then your listeners are lucky to have all your wisdom to help them prevent from having a burnout. I actually had a career burnout. I didn't know I was burnt until I actually ended up in the hospital with a heart issue. And so at age 37, I had a big wake-up call to begin to challenge the way I was doing work. I was passionate about the work I was doing. I was a leader in the green building industry, building some of the premier green buildings in Seattle, Washington, and just realized that there must be a different way to do work and life in balance, and particularly around how I was showing up for myself. And in the book, I get into that quite a bit about this concept of self-leadership. At the time, I wasn't aware because 90 to 95% of our brain body is operating unconsciously. And most of the time as leaders, we're just defaulting to however we've seen other leaders lead. And we think that's what leadership is. And leadership, as I've learned over the years, is more about how we're influencing others. And so I've learned that in order to influence ourselves in a healthier way, we need to get in tune with that inner critic. We need to get more in tune with that, all the pressure we put on ourselves, because I created my own burnout. I didn't realize that at the time. I was pretty busy blaming everybody else, but I created my burnout with all the pressure I was putting on myself and the expectations and really my inability to communicate in a healthy way with the people that I was collaborating with in my day-to-day. So I ended up with a career burnout, had an aha moment where I just realized, okay, I need to leave what I was doing and do something new. And that aha moment was like, why don't I create a place and space for leaders like me that are just overwhelmed and need a chance to reconnect to themselves, connect to nature, connect to each other, and be able to learn some really powerful conscious communication tools so that we can get at the root cause of most stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. And so that's what led me to Puerto Rico. I ended up building a retreat center here, just a small scale retreat center, but it's a high touch point that's really designed for leaders. We do a lot of leadership development and we do team building for C-suite individuals and other groups, of course. But in general, we're doing that strategically so we can make a bigger ripple effect in the leadership realm so that people can learn a way that's more in balance with themselves, and it trickles down. The ripple effect is that it then changes the paradigm for even how their employees are showing up and the level of commitment and loyalty that those employees have to a business, especially if it's a purpose-driven organization.
Great. So I really want to dig into this ripple effect pretty deeply. One of the things that I've been really struck by over the last, I'd say 6 to 18 months is that so much of the leadership content that I see, whether it's videos or written stuff, is really big idea stuff. Be a servant leader, lead with your heart, listen, all those kinds of things. Nothing wrong with that stuff exactly in my view, but I don't think it's very practical. I mean, I think that what leaders need are things that they can actually do to make it better, to create those ripple effects. So talk to me a little bit about ripples and what that means and how it transforms cultures.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the ripple effect, as I would refer to it, is first and foremost starts with the self-leadership concept of like, how are we showing up for ourselves? So are my thoughts and my behaviors and my actions creating the result that I want? And most of the time, we're not even thinking about it that way. We're just thinking that, we're having a WTF moment going on in our brain, or we're blaming someone else, and then we can't figure out why things aren't going the way we want. And the reality is that those thoughts, behaviors, and actions create those invisible ripple effects. And in the book, I really outline the science around these invisible ripple effects, because most of us would be like, wait, that's a bit weird. How do we actually know that's true? But we know that our organs, for example, all have a magnetic field. We know that the heart has the largest magnetic field of about 3 feet. And so if we're in each other's heart field, our magnetic field, then we're influencing each other in some way. And so if leadership is really about influence, then why aren't we taking more time as leaders to really make the best version of ourselves? And a lot of times I see leaders forcing themselves to do things or show up in a way that's inauthentic. They're basically organizing themselves based on what society thinks they need to do, or what their parents or what externalities have told them they need to do, and they're leading from those expectations rather than leading from who they were naturally designed in this world to be. And so when we free up all the noise, get rid of the mental chatter, that inner critic, and again, these are things that they don't just, it's not like a switch, you can switch them off, but we do have a pretty accelerated process in how we get to work with leaders here at the retreat center and help them start to see those things that they aren't seeing, but then learn it from a full body perspective, not just from their head, not just from, like a typical PowerPoint format, not at all. We're actually taking them out into nature and getting them to dial up their senses, to really stop and be present, because most of us leaders, we're telling ourselves all the time, I'm not moving fast enough, I'm not doing enough, this isn't going to be good enough. And instead of speeding up, that accelerates time. Instead of accelerating time, we often just need to stop, slow down, get present with what's going on in that moment, and then start to respond accordingly. And so we'll take people in the rainforest and slow them down, have them close their eyes, take some deep breaths, but then start to listen to the layers. Because most of the time leaders will just show up, go through the rainforest and be like, are we there yet? And they missed all the beautiful details, the birds that are singing all over the place, the stereo sound of the birds, the sounds of the raindrops hitting the trees, the sounds of the river flowing below, the sounds of the little frogs that we have here called coqui, the sounds of so many unique things that people would just blow by, and then actually getting curious when they hear those sounds to see what it is that's actually causing it. And noticing such subtle details of these beautiful plants that we have. Some of them have flowers, the smells that might come. There's so many unique smells from things that are biodegrading, the types of leaves, the different types of trees, noticing, anyway, I could geek out about this forever, but the idea is that as those senses dial up, then they start to get more sensitive as a leader. So when they return, they can notice more quickly, like, oh, wow, I didn't even see that before. I didn't even see, and hopefully getting them to see the things that they can appreciate, to shift out of that critical mindset, critical of themselves, but then critical of their team, and shift instead to a mindset of like greater appreciation for their team members. And so there's a lot of different layers of how we can demonstrate the ripple effects. We can literally look at the ocean and watch the ripple effects. We can look at the rivers or the raindrops hitting, but our thoughts, our behaviors, and actions are the metaphors for those raindrops. Like every raindrop is something that we're dropping, and it accumulates into a stream and then into a river and then eventually gets to the ocean. So similarly, if we get more intentional about those thoughts and behaviors and actions, then we can create a much more phenomenal experience, an experience that we're much more excited about and enjoy, so that ripple effect trickles down to all of our team members. So Like I feel really fortunate. It took a few years, but I've got a team that loves being here. They see the things that need to be done. It may not be in their job description exactly, but they know that we're a small team and we just need to jump in wherever we can to make sure that our guests are having the best possible experience, and our guests see that. And that's the type of thing that if I'm showing up as the best version of myself and supporting them and doing that, then it ripples out to our guests that come here, and they're able to have their accelerated breakthrough probably much quicker than if they're going to some hotel.
Oh man, sign me up. So I want to play a little game here with you. I'm a senior living CEO. I've got 50% staff turnover. My occupancy is actually pretty good, so I'm paying my bills. I'm making a decent margin, but it's like my life is just one headache at a time, topped off by this leadership, the not leadership, and it just feels like the people I'm hiring are not committed. They're not staying with it. They come and work. They don't show up, and I'm really stressed out. Where does all this fit in? How does what you do help me figure out a way to make that stop happening, or to deal with it as it is happening?
Yeah. So from a senior living perspective, and if they've got a lot of employees that are disengaged, and you said the turnover was like 50%.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a really high turnover rate. So what I would be doing is I'd be curious about, first and foremost, the leader. Like, why are they so stressed out? Because if they're stressed out, then most likely their team members are stressed out, and so they're burning out and leaving quickly. And if I can get to the root cause of that, then I would start to look at, first and foremost, getting the leader centered and excited again about the work that they're doing. Because, for example, senior living, what I get excited about when someone tells me senior living, beyond the architecture and how to frame architecture that's super connected to nature, because I know how much nature benefits people's mindsets. But the other thing is the abundance of wisdom. There's so much wisdom. These people in senior living, they've got all this wisdom, and a lot of them are bored. So how is that being leveraged to inspire the people that are working there so that they can learn something when they're there? And then the people that are living there, the seniors, actually get to utilize their wisdom. And so what I would do is I would start to shift the culture up a little bit. And I had a hard time with this at first in Puerto Rico, because the culture here is that people like to talk. And at first I was like, wait, if you're talking, you're not working. That was an old school mindset. But then I started to realize that they're connecting, and that connecting, even though, yes, it might seem like they're standing around, makes it so that they have each other's backs. And so similarly, imagine if the team in senior living that's burning out, that's turning over quickly, imagine if it's more of an environment where they get to learn and grow and evolve as team members. What it requires, though, is a leader that also sees it as an opportunity to learn and grow and be inspired. And that leader, if they're already burnt out or they're already pretty stressed out, we would need to give them a reset first to be able to come at the situation from fresh perspective. Something that's what I would call above the line, where they're open, they're curious, and they're wondering what's the best possible outcome that can come from this, versus when we're below the line, we're in a blame and victim mindset, and we're closed off, and we're frustrated, and we're not happy in our situation. So there's a lot that can be packed into the situation. I like to start with a survey and get a brief analysis of what's really going on from the employees, and then work with the leader to create some opportunities for that team to actually gel and bond in a stronger way. Because when you create those opportunities for that bonding, there's a higher level of commitment, and there's a higher level of loyalty that those employees have, because they're seeing it as a growth potential, and they're seeing it as a way that they're showing up with purpose. And there's a lot more meaning than, oh, I just have to come here and take care of these people and just do this job.
Cool. I love this so much. So you talk about in chapter 2, sort of two things that really sort of resonate with me that I'd like to have you expand on. The first is this idea that there's this subtle energy of leadership. And the second thing that goes along with that is the idea of harnessing the trade winds of influence. And I've been thinking a lot about, and some stuff going on in my personal life, so not necessarily work, but I think that applies is that you can have authority without influence, or you can have influence without authority. And this whole idea of influence is really, and energy, I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, and I know the word energy is used all over the place, and it's
Yeah.
kind of a big term, hot term at the moment. The way I like to look at it is, wow, like even at the waves are moving, and what are they moving from? Well, they're usually moving from winds, and especially if there's trade winds that just kind of start to whip up the water in the ocean, then the energy starts to compound and build into a wave once it hits shallower water. So think of yourself as a leader, and the way you show up with your team, the way you show up with your clients, you're creating waves. And those waves can be intentional with, let's start with an example. Let's start with sound waves. We're all familiar with sound waves. We get inspired to move. You turn on a song that most people know, and unless someone has a bad association, they start just moving with the music unconsciously. They're just moving with the tone. And so it's a similar thing where if you yourself show up in a really fun vibration, then your people start moving in that fun way as well. And so however you want to get yourself aligned as a leader, what I recommend is that's a process of getting to know yourself, so you're showing up in an authentic way. But those ripples can start to be more intentional. And I refer to a couple of studies in the book, and one of them is around entrainment, and how at a big symphony hall, they hooked up devices to people to measure their heart rate variability. And they found that after a certain period of time, not only were the people playing the orchestra getting into a coherent alignment, a coherent resonant alignment between their head, their heart, and their body, but their heart rate started to synchronize, and their heart rate variability started to synchronize. And so we can do things as a leader to actually get our team more into synchronization. And when you're doing that intentionally on a regular basis, that's what I call an entrainment, meaning when my team is aligned and they're showing up as the best version of themselves, and we have a group show up, and there might be one or two outliers in that group that don't really seem like they want to be here, especially if we're doing team building and they feel required to be here. There's a form of entrainment that occurs where they just energetically start to come along with the vibration we're showing up at. And so, yeah, I get that what I'm saying is still a little bit out there in concept, but just even for a leader that's listening right now, like what would it look like to just play some different music, or ask your team members what the best kind of music would be, and hopefully pick something without too many lyrics, but that has a good beat. And then just start your meeting, your team meeting, with a little bit of music, and just see what shifts for you, how you might show up with a little more ease and flow, and make sure that people are breathing in their bellies so that you're oxygenating all your organs. And there's just subtle things that can start to happen that make everything flow, because we know that any kind of business is going to have challenges. That's a given. And so how can we approach those challenges every day from that place of above the line, to be open, to be curious, to wonder what's the best possible outcome that's going to come from this experience today, and what am I going to learn today?
So I really like that. I'm actually thinking right now, Jada, who produces in the background, she's going to roll her eyes at me in a minute. We can see her, you can't. But I'm started thinking I'm going to start out. I do a team meeting every Friday morning, and so I got to go figure out some music to start off with. So I love that. So one of the things that, as you were talking, that really resonates with me and is actually a big puzzle is, if you go to Silicon Valley, there's this company called NVIDIA. Everybody knows about NVIDIA. They have, their stock growth has been meteoric. They are winning AI chip business. They have better chips and they've got a big moat, competitive moat. And so because of that, if you are a software or hardware engineer, pretty much any place in the world, and you have the opportunity to go to work for NVIDIA, you're going to jump at that chance. The one place everybody wants to go work, if you're in that space, most businesses are not seen that way. Most businesses are, I guess that'd be an okay place to work. Is it possible for, we'll use senior living. Is it possible for a senior living organization to become so great using your principles that it becomes the place that everybody wants to work. Because if everybody wants to work there, you're going to have not have recruiting problems. You're not going to have retention problems. People are going to want to stay.
Yeah, I definitely think it's possible, Steve. I've sort of joked since I invested most of my retirement money into building Casa Alternativa. I've joked that, well, I guess there are ramps here, and as I get older, it can be my own senior living situation.
Yeah.
But in reality, I definitely, I'm not just saying this. I have a couple of employees, a couple of team members that say that they feel like they should be paying me to work here because they love it so much. So I know if I've been able to create that environment, that it's possible, especially in senior living, to create that environment. And that comes down to a number of things. One, we spoke about this right when we were getting on the call, is the physical space, the architectural space makes a huge difference. And I'm not talking about big flashy architecture. I'm talking about how are you connecting people to nature? How are the daylight and the views and the situational experiences where people get to interact really inspiring, and doing it in a manner that people want to be in that space? And that's subtle energy in itself as well. It's about creating the right daylighting. It's about creating the right types of fresh air, ventilation. It's about creating and bringing in the right materials. And then from there, looking at what is it that I'm doing with my team on a regular basis. We do a team retreat every 3 months. Seems like a lot, and it pays dividends. Like, I already have multiple case studies for team retreats I do for other clients. But I know that for my team, the more that I'm teaching them the conscious communication skills that I'm working with other companies that are coming here, that they're learning, that they're growing and evolving as human beings, but they also continue to want to be here because they're excited about the subtlety of what it is that we're doing. So that in-person time, it's often undervalued by a lot of companies, but it really pays off if you do it right. And I'm not talking about the type of team building where everybody just goes out drinking and bowling. That can turn into a bad situation real quick. I'm talking about like really intentional, well thought out learning environments that are hopefully happening out in nature. And then from there, creating opportunities where regular appreciation is a core part of the culture. And so it starts with you as a leader, how you appreciating yourself as a leader, how you appreciating others, and then for your managers to really be focusing on appreciating what people are doing, and then creating the connection with your clients. Like I said earlier, like there's so much opportunity in senior living to create a completely different paradigm, where those people are often like looking for someone to inspire, to mentor, to spend time with. And even though I can hear probably some of the listeners going like, what, you want me to pay for my employees to spend time? Well, actually, there's some huge benefit in creating a balance, financial balance, where if people love to work there so much because they get the freedom to have a conversation once in a while. Obviously, it can't be that they're just having conversations the whole time, but are there positions where there's just hosts and people are just spending time integrating and or creating opportunities where the employees are not being paid to be there, but there's an employee hour where they get to show up and just hang out with those that are there. I'm just riffing off some ideas, but it's about how
I love this. But one of the questions that occurred to me as you were talking about doing team retreats on a quarterly basis. So first, I really like that idea a lot. But one of the things I see happening in senior living, and I don't know how to bridge this gap, is that at a management level, senior level, say from executive directors, which would be the general manager at a property up, they tend to do a pretty good job of bringing team members together on a regular basis. Almost all companies have a big annual meeting. A lot of them will do 2 or 3 or 4. But then they've got all these frontline workers. These are the people that are cleaning floors and doing care, bathing and dressing and meds and doing activities. And I go to a senior living CEO and say, hey, you got to do a retreat for all your frontline workers. They're saying, I ain't doing that. I can't pay for it. I don't know how to staff, but and I think probably from a practical standpoint, pretty tough to do. How do we do retreats for people at work? Is it possible? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I could imagine in senior living, you just do a retreat there and include your members, meaning like what's a topic that those frontline workers are struggling with? Okay, so a topic that most of the frontline workers struggle with is, they might be having a hard time with just their own finances at home because they're not making a lot of money. They've never learned to budget. They've never really learned to make a plan ahead or do savings. And then also there's confidence as well. And so there's probably a wealth of knowledge in the people that are already at the facility. But I want to come back to a point, which is, those frontline people are probably the most important people to be looking after, because those are probably the 50 percenters that they're losing most often.
Yeah.
And so we changed even the name of our house cleaning position. It's actually house beautification. And instead of teaching them about cleaning, we teach them about moving energy. And first and foremost, moving their own energy before they show up to work in a room. And then when they do work a room, how are they working that room to make it beautiful so people feel inspired and safe and comfortable so they can move through their personal growth process? Because leaders are coming here for deep work, and we want to make sure that we prep the room for that deep work. So house beautification. So even just changing the way that work is done, because cleaning is typically seen as such a mundane, like lowly thing that has to be done. But how can we make cleaning fun again? We can make cleaning fun by thinking about it as like, wow, okay, let's see who's going to notice like what I've done different in this space that they just want to be there, or like have a challenge to see which room are people going to gravitate to, and give people a little more flexibility in beautifying some spaces so that, oh, wow, look at all those wild flowers. Those are from the yard, and look at how much better this feels and how people gravitate to those. I'm just throwing out some random ideas, but the idea is like empowering those frontline workers to be able to see themselves as part of a bigger system, as part of a world improving system, and specifically in senior living, because there's so much opportunity there.
Cool. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. One of the things I like to always ask my guests, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, even though Jada said I wouldn't. But anyway, my question is this. I'd love to, so everybody loves praise and affirmation, right? But most of our big learnings come from failure. So I would love to have you, if you're willing, to share a failure story, a failure either in your architectural career, your leadership career, or maybe a retreat where things didn't go well and what you learned from it.
Yeah, I see those as like opportunities all the time. There's quite a few written examples in my book. I started out this conversation on my introduction of saying my failure was I was stuck in a blame and victim mindset because I didn't know any better of how to communicate what was really going on for me. I think that failures are important, and I don't actually usually see them as failures. I've been an artist in a past life, well, literally in this life, but when I was younger. And I always saw that when you make a move in the artwork, or if you're painting and the painting goes in a direction where like, oh, damn, that was an accident. That's not what I meant. But then how quick can you get creative about finding a way to make it even better? And so similarly with, an error or a mistake, it's always about like, how can you quickly correct it and turn it into something even better? I would say that a lot of times when, like I'm in hospitality, so sometimes it's hard for me to say no. And as a leader, it's really important to learn when to say no and to listen to my body. My body tells me pretty quick now when there's a no. And sometimes I'll say yes to something and I already have a wobble going into it. And then we're in the middle of the retreat and I'm like, oh, wow, I probably should have said no to this because they're not respecting what it is that we do. They don't understand. They didn't listen to what we had to say or whatever. And it's always this opportunity for me to be like, okay, I can shift below the line and get in a blame or victim mindset, or I can be like, time out. Hey, this is what I'm noticing. And I'm wondering if you guys would be open to getting on the same page with the rest of us. And so I just continuously see those mistakes as opportunities to quickly implement my conscious communication work and get it corrected. But yeah, mistakes happen all the time. It could be something simple like driving to a nature adventure. And sometimes when I'm talking to the group in the car, I miss the turnoff and the person following me, the other team member following me is like, what are you doing? But I'll just turn it into like, oh yeah, I wanted to show you guys something. No,
that's right. Yeah.
I totally missed that missed that spot. I missed that turnoff, but isn't it cool? We get to now look at this project that's happening here.
Cool. One more question, and then we'll wrap up. So somebody get your book. I know your book's not quite out. We'll talk in a minute about how people can get your book. But somebody reads your book over the weekend. A leader reads your book over the weekend, and they say, "Oh man, I got to do something different." What's a low-hanging fruit where would you tell them to start? What one practice should they start with?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I printed about 50 advanced readers copies and got it out to a bunch of friends and people that I really respect. And a couple of these higher level CEOs, one of them, he's a good friend of mine. He's from Belarus, and he read the first chapter and he's like, "But Yancy, I had no idea you were this smart." and he's like, "I already started to change things in my company, and here's what I noticed." And so what just even in the first chapter, like challenging ourselves, like the book has a number of questions in it that hopefully challenge a leader that's reading it to question, like, am I showing up as the best version of myself? And if not, what are those first things that should shift? Now, it's going to be different for everyone, what those first things would be. But I'll tell you, most leaders I work with have a pretty strong inner critic. And while most of us will say we have a strong inner critic, very few people have gone through enough depth to start to catch those narratives that we're running unconsciously all the time, that then create an invisible ripple effect that's creating static with the people we work with. So I would say a good first one is just start to note what's that dialogue, write it down, and then look at how you could start to reframe it. If you're telling yourself, "Wow, I'm such a dumbass, like what was I thinking?" Instead, you could say, "Wow, I'm an amazing human being and I sometimes make mistakes, but like looking at different ways to rephrase it, like just I'm an amazing human being and I'm learning from this process." So that's probably a simple one. Simple that's not so simple, but then also noticing how quickly you can get into a blame or victim mindset. That's another one. And being able to shift it into a place where you can acknowledge, wow, I actually have a choice. I actually have an ability to take on different actions and to respond differently. And so when you notice blaming someone, you can stop and be like, "Wow, I'm totally blaming you," or "I'm totally blaming that person," and then ask yourself, I do. My choice in this is I can say no to doing this right now instead of blaming you for continuing to do something I really don't want to do.
Cool. This has been a great conversation. Talk to me for a minute about where people can find you, about your book, how they get access to that, when it's going to be out.
Thanks. I have this book, Amplify Your Leadership. It's basically the book that I wish I would have written for myself or when I was younger, and that hopefully will benefit so many leaders. You can find it on yancywright.com. That's a pre-order. It will be out on Amazon on pre-order soon. My goal is to have it launched in the next couple of months. All I have to do now is just fine tune a few things. It's already written, just working on that fine tuning, and then I'll get it up for people to buy the actual printed copy. But if you want to pre-order it, that would be awesome. And then if you really have questions for me and want to reach out on LinkedIn, you can find me at Yancy Wright. And the arena that you're working in is super fascinating to me, the senior living space, and that's only growing. So I look forward to hearing more of what's going on in your world and how you've been helping shape the culture in that world, because it definitely could use it.
Very good. Great. Yancy, thank you very much. This is a great conversation. We will be back next week with some more great live streams. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate the opportunity.